As we start the second section in Unit 5, we're going to talk about constructing statistical graphs. So we're going to begin with a histogram, which is a type of bar graph. What you want to remember is that on the histogram, you're going to put the class boundaries on the x-axis. And remember that when you're talking about a graph, the x-axis is the one that goes across, so you're going to have your class boundaries down here, and your frequencies are going to go on the y-axis. And so your y-axis is the other one. It's the one that goes up and down. And so your frequencies will be marked off across this y-axis. All right, so we're going to look at an example. We have a frequency distribution on the screen, and we want to draw a histogram to go with it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw my x and y axis. And then I want to mark my boundaries off along the x-axis. So remember that these will be your x values, and then you'll be putting your frequencies on the y-axis. All right, so when I go to mark my boundaries off, I'm going to equally space my tick marks. I don't want to repeat any of the boundaries. All right, so I'm going to begin with placing a tick mark here, and I'm going to write the first boundary underneath that tick mark, so 5.5. Then the next boundary is going to be 132.5. The next boundary is also 132.5, and remember that we said we don't want to repeat any of the values. So I'm going to move on, and the next boundary will be 259.5. And then I'm going to continue until I have all of my boundaries marked off. So there will be 3 more. So we'll have 386.5. We'll have 513.5. And we'll have 640.5. Now, you do want a label along that x-axis. If you actually had some information about the data, like if you knew that these numbers were test scores, you would put something like test scores on the bottom. Or if you knew that they were, say, somebody's height or weight, you could put that kind of information. But since we don't have that, I'm just going to go ahead and down here put class boundaries. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the y's. I note that the highest frequency value that I have is 16. I do need a scale that is equally spaced. So I need to determine something that I can count by. You could count by 2s or by 4s, or maybe I think I'm going to do 5s in this case. So I'm going to do 5, 10, 15, and 20, but you do want something so that your y values are equally spaced. And then I'm just going to put an F over here. F is pretty widely accepted to mean frequency when you're doing graphs. All right, so now we're ready to draw our graph. Remember that we're drawing a bar graph. So we're going to use this first set of boundaries and this first frequency. So on my graph, I'm going to start at 5.5, and I'm going to extend the line up until I get to 16. And then I'm going to end it at 132.5. So again, I'm going to extend this line up till I get to 16. And draw my bar like that. All right, for the next one is going to do the boundaries from 132.5 to 259.5, and it's going to have a height of 3. So it's going to come in and start right on top of this other bar. So we're going to come up to about 3. We're going to go over and then down, ending that bar at the 259.5. For my third class, note that it has a frequency of 0, as does the fourth class. So for both of these classes, we're not going to be able to see a bar because the bar would have no height to it. All right, so essentially we're going to skip those two, and then we're going to move to our last one, which will be 513.5 to 640.5, and that bar goes up to 1. So I'm going to start at 513.5 and go over and end it at 640.5. All right, so in doing so, we've now drawn our histogram for our frequency distribution. Okay, we're going to look at one other example just to go through it one more time. All right, so we have a different example, a different frequency distribution with the same idea that we want to draw a histogram. Again, just as a reminder, remember that your boundaries go on your x-axis, so across, and your frequency values go on your y, so up and down. Okay, and so what you might want to do is stop the presentation here and attempt to draw this one yourself, and then you can come back in a few minutes and check and see if you drew it correctly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my x and y axis. All right, I'm going to mark my boundaries off. Again, there's going to be 6 tick marks. And we'll write our boundaries underneath. So starting with 424.5. The next boundary will be 505.5. Then we have 586.5. Remember, no repeats. Then 667.5. 748.5. And finally 829.5. Again, if you know what your data represents, you can use something along those lines to write your label. If you don't, we're just simply going to write class boundaries. All right, so looking at my y values, I notice that the highest y value is 11. So again, you need to determine a scale that you can use for that. Since it's relatively small, I think I'm just going to count by ones, but if you wanted to do something else, you certainly could. And then we'll do a F to stand for frequency. All right, so again, we'll now start drawing our bars. Our first bar is going to start at 424, end at 505, and it's going to have a frequency of 11. So here's the starting point for the first bar. I'm going to extend the line up to 11. Come across and go down. Our second class has a height of 5. Our third bar is at 3. Then we have a 0, which remember means that the bar is not able to be seen. And finally, our last bar will be at 1. All right, and so again, now we have our histogram for the frequency distribution.